It's Monday afternoon. That means it's time to talk about the box office, Dan. We got some box offices that we need to talk. So many, including some Fantastic Beasts and a mixed bag for Warner Brothers. Could that be the title, Fantastic Beasts and the Mixed Bag for Warner Brothers?
I'm sure that's not the title they wanted. I'm sure they wanted Fantastic Beasts and the Home Run.
Yeah.
But it is. I mean, that's the core of the question that we're going to ask today is, what do these opening weekend numbers mean, and where we think it can go from here? But I think mixed bag is fair, and we'll explain why.
We will get into why when we get into the international numbers and the domestic numbers. But let's start with those domestic numbers where it underperformed versus expectations, and certainly versus the last film.
Yeah, I mean, there had been expectations that it could do 70 to 75 and ended up at about $62 million. The last film, it is below by about 12 million, which we'll look at in a second here. But yeah, it's the lowest opening for any film in the Wizarding world. That would be Fantastic Beasts / Harry Potter franchise. It's a very competitive time frame right now. There are a lot of movies that are doing really well, which is something else that we'll talk about in a second. But what I would be looking at if I were Warner Brothers was every film in the Harry Potter franchise has gotten an A or A- cinema score. This was the first film that dipped into the Bs. This one got a B+. So if I were the studio, I would look at the fact that it opened on the very low end of expectations. The audience score, a B+ is okay, but it's the lowest of any film of any iteration of Harry Potter. The reviews, certainly the worst reviewed movie of any film in the franchise. These are the things, if I were Warner Brothers, that I would say perhaps they might get away with this one. But they need to have an eye toward the future potential.
And a B+ also sort of gives us a hint. First of all, we're heading into a competitive field. It gives us a little bit of a hint about how much this will hold or not, though we could be surprised. And it's also the opening weekend. This is Harry Potter. These are the hardest core fans that are going to be coming out this opening weekend, and they were not delighted.
Not exactly. And when you look at a B+, there are really, it sounds very straightforward, but there are kind of two kinds of B+. Yeah. I tweeted this out this weekend. Like The Meg and Ocean's 8 both got a B+.
Which is a positive
Which is a positive B+, because those movies did very well compared to their openings. They're Warner Brothers films. They both made a lot of money. But I also think that both of those films, people weren't necessarily expecting a lot out of them. There was certainly a lot of skepticism around both of them. So I think that might be a surprised B+. Justice League also received a B+, which did not do well at the box office, domestically or internationally.
That's a year on notice B+.
That's a year on notice B+.
Justice League and Fantastic Beasts is a year on notice.
And it seems like perhaps that might be the B+ that we're seeing from the audience on this. But there's a lot of this story that has yet to be written, and there's a big chunk of it which involves the international box office, which we will discuess
shortly.
Very soon.
Very soon. Let's talk about that Grinch, which held pretty well. Universal's got to be pretty happy about it. So, well, we'll get into this internationally. It's still got a lot of markets yet to open in, too.
It's got markets left to open. It is a movie that is a bit U.S.-centric in the sense that Dr. Seuss and the Grinch are very sort of rooted in Americana. So I think they were looking for the big play here. And a 42% drop. It had a really good opening, or a strong opening. 42% drop. That's the kind of family hold that we talk about when you want to see that the Nutcracker didn't necessarily get. That you want to see with a family film. For it to drop 42%, it's going to be coasting into Thanksgiving. I think this movie's probably going to do pretty well over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend coming up. It's at 125 domestically. Through 10 days, it is the second highest grossing Dr. Seuss adaptation behind the Grinch, the other Grinch, the Jim Carrey Grinch. I'm going to be really interested to see how it compares with Ralph Breaks the Internet as far as the animated family market over the Thanksgiving break. I think they're both going to make a pretty good amount of money.
I think they're both going to make a lot of money. I think that Ralph Breaks the Internet will handily win the weekend, and then it's really about the Grinch is relevant through Christmas.
It's relevant for another 6 weeks.
Another 6 weeks. The Christmas music's already on my radio station.
Oh boy.
Not gonna lie, I listened to it. Bohemian Rhapsody, speaking of music, continues to hang in there and do very well. This one has, Dan, say it so the people can drink there.
It has legs.
It does have legs.
It's got serious legs.
Drink your apple juice.
It drops to number 3, but it is near $130 million domestically. And we'll talk about it a little bit with the worldwide too, but this movie is really striking a chord, no pun intended, globally. It is near $400 million worldwide, which Queen, it just shows you when you pick the subject matter with the right kind of band, how globally successful some bands are, because this is really, really, really doing well worldwide.
And it's holding really well. Wasn't it like a global 27%?
27% drop worldwide,
crazy.
which is great, especially
Queen.
when Venom is out there doing crazy things in China. And again, Fantastic Beasts with its worldwide opening.
Competing, especially in the UK.
Yeah, it's one of those times where sometimes when you're opening a movie, you can predict what the competition is going to be, and sometimes you just can't. And Bohemian Rhapsody is one of those movies that for every other movie in the marketplace right now, I don't think anybody had Bohemian Rhapsody in there as serious competition, especially at this point in its run. But it's holding really well.
It's holding great, and you and I liked it, so there you go.
Yeah.
It's a crowd pleaser.
Yeah.
Instant Family, speaking of crowd pleaser, this is a dramedy comedy set starring Mark Wahlberg, Rose Byrne, and, you know, I think there was a hope here that the families would come out for this one. Did okay, but it's got some work to do.
It does. We have two movies here with Instant Family and Widows that I think have two different paths ahead of them potentially. Instant Family, they both opened, I think, lower than both studios would have wanted them to. However, Instant Family is a family skewing comedy, and the word of mouth on it has been very strong. I believe the cinema score is an A, which is good going into the Thanksgiving weekend for that to be.
Critics liked it?
Yeah, critics liked it. I'm not saying it's going to go up there with The Grinch as far as like competing up in that, but I think that there's a potential for it to really grow on its opening in this holiday weekend and beyond. Widows, which opened at number 5, that is a disappointing opening considering, number one, its budget, and also the fact that this movie had been building buzz for a very long time, potential awards buzz, and
this is one that's interesting because critics have been, I haven't seen it yet, you have. Critics have been talking about this movie for months. Audiences gave it a B, didn't seem to like it.
Well, it's not the movie that is promised in the sense of if you saw the trailer for this film,
really,
this is not the movie. This is not that movie. I was a little bit more mixed on it than a lot of critics were. I enjoyed it and I recommended it, but I was a little more mixed on it. And honestly, I'm not surprised to see the fact that general audiences were way more mixed on this movie because it is not exactly what you think it is. It is a little more esoteric. It is a little more...
Well, that's Steve McQueen's style.
Right, but I think it was sold as, here is a badass heist film,
movie.
Revenge thriller, and it's not exactly that.
That's interesting. I mean,
at least not in pace and tempo and tone.
Yeah. Well, Steve McQueen, he obviously did 12 Years a Slave. He also did Shame.
Yeah.
He did Hunger. His style is that way. So I was actually surprised to see him do a big sort of racy heist film.
It's not. It is not as mainstream in tone and sensibility, I think, as it was sold. And I think that's where you're seeing some of the word of mouth lag because it is, I think, a movie that a lot of critics respond to, but particularly opening night crowds, the ones that are filling out cinema score cards, it's not exactly what it appears to be. And I think that might be working against it in the sense of putting it out on a big, open, wide release immediately. Looking back, perhaps it might have been wiser to platform it just a little bit more. But even then, we're going to talk about another movie. Even that approach is not exactly working for some films that studios thought it might. So who knows?
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. There's just speaking of disappointments, The Girl in the Spider's Web is a huge disappointment for Sony. Overlord is a disappointment for us.
Yes, Overlord dropped 62% down to 8th place, and The Girl in the Spider's Web, A New Dragon Tattoo Story, which is the official title, and I guess I have to call it that, it dropped almost 70%.
That's bad.
Down. That's not good. Both off of very disappointing openings. So any hope that they would sort of find a post-release crowd is evaporating very quickly, and their box office runs are essentially over in week 2.
Yeah.
Which certainly Sony with Girl in the Spider's Web, that's not the result that they wanted.
Well, they're lucky that they have Venom. They've got Into the Spider-Verse coming out, but this certainly isn't going to be an IP that gets any more films, and I think they'll probably sit with it for some time and not know quite what to do with it.
Yeah.
And Overlord, I will confess, I thought this might be a sleeper, but it just audiences are not responding to it.
Yeah, that surprises me a little bit because I thought Overlord might be one of those that didn't quite drop this much, but it does not seem to be of the taste. I think it might be too have too much of an edge on it, or
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what it is, but it's not having that appeal, and so that's going to be one that people, I guess, are going to find later, and it might be a little too niche.
It might be a little too niche. They'll find it when it comes home. I'll be fascinated to see if there's a change of a tide on this one
Yeah.
at that point. And we should try and analyze why it didn't work, because I'd
Yeah.
be curious to hear what we come up with. But different kind of movies, two very different movies per screen, At Eternity's Gate, and then the big awards push movie, Green Book.
Yeah, so At Eternity's Gate took top per screen, 23,000 per on 4 screens. That is Willem Dafoe. He stars as Vincent Van Gogh. He is sort of a dark horse outsider awards contender, so it's not shocking to see it open there. And it's not the kind of movie that you'd expect to open at 30 or 40 or 50 plus K per screen. But one movie, we talked about The Frontrunner last week on the show. The Frontrunner did not perform per screen and actually is doing really, really badly now.
It's DOA.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Another movie that opened on 25 screens that's actually getting a very wide release, 1,000 plus screens this weekend, is Green Book. Green Book is directed by Peter Farrelly, who is one of the co-directors of Dumb and Dumber and a lot of other comedy films. Stars Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali. And I think there was some expectation given the buzz around this. This was an audience. This is not necessarily a critical favorite going into festival season. This was an audience favorite that it might do better. It had the 3rd best per screen average of the weekend, about 12.8 thousand, which is okay. But given the buzz, I think a lot of people were surprised that it wasn't higher. I saw it this weekend. I really enjoyed it. I think this is a film that can appeal to a very broad audience. I don't think it is as inaccessible or needs a platform release in quite the same way as a lot of awards contenders. So I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on Green Book because I think this movie could do very well in wide release if people find it. And so I think that'll be the question is, can Universal get people into the theater? Because I think once they get people in there, that it's going to have great buzz and great word of mouth, but not a good start on a per-screen basis.
And kind of a disappointing one where I'm hearing, again, this is another one that I have to catch up with, haven't seen it yet, hearing great things from critics as well about this movie. Additionally, it feels like one of those films that's an awards contender that can also be audience pleasing.
Yeah.
So often awards contenders feel arduous to watch. And I don't think that we're actually in a moment in our history where many people, and I think we're seeing this at the box office, as we typically do, people don't want to watch arduous movies right now. Life is feeling pretty arduous.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm seeing some backlash on it online, and I'm sure it'll continue. Which I'd like to review it at some point, just because I see where some of it's coming from. But I think again, it's got the potential to really reach a lot of people, and I was a big fan of a lot of what this movie had to say. So. This is one of those that could be a kind of out of nowhere contender, but it needs a little help and a little more love, I think, particularly from audiences to get it over the top.
So Fantastic Beasts for the moment and the Crimes of Grindelwald sits at the top of the world. It made over $250 million. However, Dan, that's not the whole story.
Yes, this is. There's a lot of different things to break into. So yeah, this is the worldwide debut. Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald had, I guess Grindelwald is how I have to say it. Grindelwald had the #1 debut, just over $250 million. That's about where it was projected. Some people thought it could go as high as 275, but 250. That is better than the first film debuted on its opening weekend. However, the first film, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, did not open day and date in China. This movie did.
And got its ass beat by Venom.
Venom kicked its butt. So it is a better... Maybe. I'm not sure. It is a better opening than the last film. That is true. But it also opened in a few more markets. And I think if you looked at the actual... More, right? It was several more. If you looked at the actual number, it's about even with the last movie worldwide. So... that, I think, is what we kind of want to drill down into a little bit is what do these numbers mean? What do we want to look out for? Because, opening weekend's not everything. So I also like to sort of say, what should we look out for? What are the tea leaves to look for in the next weeks?
Let's get into those tea leaves. Well, I think that one of the things that we should talk about is that it did have historic historic openings in a number of markets. However, caveat to that, and to your point, Venom not handily, but it beat it by there was a pretty fair margin.
Venom beat it by a
about,
pretty fair margin.
Yeah.
I have to look at, I've got the numbers, but it wasn't close.
In China.
In China, yeah. Venom had the best second weekend for any superhero movie ever. Venom is proving to be a breakout hit in its own right in China.
Venom's destroying, is eating the heads off all of the other movies.
Yes, it is. It's going to continue to do really well. But putting Fantastic Beasts in the context of the rest of the Wizarding world, this is how it's stacked up as far as worldwide openings. Fantastic Beasts is number 5. It edged out the last film, Fantastic Beasts. Obviously, 4 other Harry Potter movies. Now, the thing to remember with the Harry Potter franchise is it started in 2001, and over the decade following, that was the advent and the rise of the day-and-date global openings. So if you're asking, if you're kind of looking at these and wondering, like, well, why are all of these the later Harry Potter films? Most of the earlier ones, or a lot of them, did not have those global drop dates of like one weekend. They would kind of be staggered. So Harry Potter is one of the first franchises, actually, historically, when you look at it, that mastered the art of releasing it globally around the world, and it makes sense for that franchise.
Accio money,
exactly. So, but even given that, Fantastic Beasts,
and they want that story to tell.
They do. They want to be able to see, like, Harry Potter enchants the world.
Yeah.
I believe when Deathly Hallows Part 2 opened, it had the biggest worldwide launch of any film ever. Of course, it's been topped many times over by this point. But so given the context of that, Fantastic Beasts, number 5. But here's something that I wanted to look at, which is like looking at it market for market. Because you're right, looking in many of its markets, and Warner Brothers rightfully put this number right out because it's impressive. It did very well in a lot of foreign markets. And exceeded the first movie in a lot of foreign markets.
It's so amazing how you have to dig in because the story can be spun into like record-breaking in all these foreign markets.
Right.
But in key markets.
Yeah, I wanted to look at the five most profitable, or the 5 highest grossing markets for the last film and how it did there. So this is a side-by-side chart. The left side of your screen is the first film. The right side of your screen is this film. And when you look at its top 5 global markets, this is where I think they might want to have pause. As you can see, the U.S. opening was $12 million below. China was about 3.4 below. UK was lower at $2.6 million. Now, Japan was the 4th highest market. We're not going to know Japan until Friday. It opens there on Friday. Germany, it grew. So Germany is one of those markets where they saw growth.
Yeah.
And that was the case in a lot of markets. But, and this is going to be one of the key questions going forward, is what does the tail end of this look like, particularly in those top 3 markets, US, China, UK? Does it have a slight drop off? As we're seeing here, the US drop off was a little more pronounced, but other than that, there's slight drop offs. But does it tail off more in the UK, China, and the US? And will the gains in other markets offset that? That's what to look for, I think, in the coming weeks with this movie.
And it's got some competition coming in
across
markets. Some pretty hefty competitions, including a film. Ralph Breaks the Internet is set to make, it's projected at about $65 million here in the US.
Yeah.
And it's very well reviewed. It's hitting into a lot of popular IPs.
Yeah.
It got 16 million views on the trailer on YouTube. I mean, there's a lot to say that this movie is going to do. Well, certainly it's going to do better than the first Wreck-It Ralph.
Yes.
But very, very well. How do you feel? I feel incredibly bullish about this movie. It's also good.
Well, I don't know if I can feel bullish about anything, just for the sense of when you look at the first Fantastic Beasts film, its biggest competition was Moana.
Yeah.
Moana opened the Thanksgiving weekend after it. So those were the two, if you're looking in the family market, those were the 2 biggest draws, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and Moana. This year, you have Fantastic Beasts in week 2. You have The Grinch, which held very well, is a Christmas-themed movie, holiday-themed movie. That's going to be a popular choice for a lot of people. You have Ralph Breaks the Internet, which is a family-themed movie. And you also have Creed 2, which could potentially draw off some of the not kids, but the younger teenage to even some of the adult crowd. That combined with the audience reaction to the film,
I felt bullish for Ralph, not Fantastic Beasts.
But I think that in general, this is a very crowded and competitive
market.
Thanksgiving market, particularly domestically. So I am actually going to be, this is what I do for fun over holiday weekends. I'm going to be very closely watching and very curious to see what the numbers are here in the U.S. for Fantastic Beasts this upcoming week, because I think it has more competition across more demographic areas that the first film did not have. And I think that's where the story is going to be written on this film. What does it do this weekend here? What does it do this weekend in the UK? How does it open in Japan? How does it do in China? Does Venom keep sucking up like so much of the air in the Chinese box office? Because if ultimately this film does make some gains in other markets, but finishes behind or even equivalent to the first film globally, I think that's going to be the point at which Warner Brothers has to say, we have 3 more of these, and we've just seen the air come out of one of our huge tentpole franchises as far as the larger DCEU, meaning the big picture one, not the individual films, but the big picture one. That's where I think they're going to have to pay attention, because then it's a whole new ballgame now. If the large big picture DCEU is sort of deflating, and now the Harry Potter franchise begins to deflate a little bit, as a studio, you have to be very conscious of what you're doing, because those are 2 massive money-generating machines that you really need to keep rolling.
Well, the good news and the bad, it's a good news, bad news situation for Warner Brothers all over the map. I think the good news is they are course correcting. They have Walter Hamada now on DC, and hopefully making some changes that will yield both creative and financial boons for them. 2 is we've talked about this before, there are some obvious tweaks that you can make if you want to around Fantastic Beasts, which is get JK rolling, a screenwriting partner, perhaps switch the director, go in a new direction to tap into what audiences are craving out of that and to make it some creative changes. But the best news of all is that they've had a number of hits from a diverse array of genre. No one film is going to make or break them this year. They have The Mick, they have Crazy Rich Asians, they have A Star is Born, so that's really good news.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a bet. I mean, I say Ralph handily takes the domestic #1 spot this weekend. I would think, and where are you on how much Fantastic Beasts is going to drop here?
I have no idea.
No clue.
I couldn't even begin to predict it. I think there are way too many X factors as far as audience reaction, competition in the marketplace. I wouldn't even, it's kind of fun, because I honestly couldn't even begin to tell you who's going to make what, how much it's going to drop. Like, I think it's so wide open, and there's so many different movies. It depends on quality. It depends on Creed 2. I think the first reviews are out there pretty strong. It seems like we haven't seen it yet. We'll be seeing that soon. Robin Hood is another movie that I didn't even mention that is opening this weekend. I don't know how much of a factor that's going to be. Tune in tomorrow morning. We've got our review for that film.
You'll find out.
So I'm not going to handicap it, because I think whatever I say, I'd probably be wrong.
Okay.
And there's some weekends where I just like to sit back and watch, and I will be very anxious to see how all these movies do.
I say 40%, and that's being very generous.
Yeah, well, it's tough too, because it's 40% over 3 days. Well, Thursday's a big day, and Wednesday's a big day,
well, now
and
you're
then
making me
three
do
over
math,
3.
so we gotta move on
it's a
to
whole
the
math
world.
thing. Yeah, exactly. Let's just look at the 2018. Here's one thing you don't need a math degree to know. Venom's doing really well. Venom just outgrossed Deadpool 2 over the weekend. We mentioned it had a phenomenally successful weekend in China. It's probably going to, I can't imagine that it doesn't outgross Mission Impossible Fallout. It's going to be the 5th highest grossing movie of the year. And if you say that you saw that coming, you're a liar. Pants on fire. There's no way anybody saw that coming. It's going to be at least 8 times its budget worldwide. I have no words. Sony is so happy.
Sony is psyched. And the ancillary, really interesting side effect of this has got to be that I know there must be meetings now around Sony and Marvel, and where they're heading with Tom Holland and Spider-Man, where they are just cocky. And they're like, we have Venom, we really don't need this deal anymore. If there's any kind of a disenchantment around that partnership, I wonder if we'll be seeing the results of that anytime over the next couple of years.
It certainly strengthens Sony's position.
Sure does.
It strengthens Sony's position, not just with regards to those characters, but just as a studio, because franchises don't grow on trees. And they've certainly had their fair share of, even in the Spider-Man universe, trying to launch franchises and failing. So for them to have launched what looks like a viable franchise, at least till the next movie, it's always one movie at a time, that certainly strengthens them a lot in a lot of many different ways. So Good for Sony.
Good for Sony.
Venom's doing really well.
Competition is good. Competition is good in these crowded, mega studio markets that we're currently about to be in.
Speaking of competition.
Currently about to be in. Sure.
It's late in the day. We've had a very long day.
It's been a long day.
Here at Screen
Speaking
Junkies
of competition, let's talk about the weekend. We did a little bit.
Yes, we did. Creed 2, Ralph Breaks the Internet, Robin Hood, all opening on Wednesday. To get ahead of the holiday. Green Book expanding to 1,000 theaters, so you're going to have all those options, plus Bohemian Rhapsody, plus The Grinch, plus Fantastic Beasts. I would say it'd be a good time to have Movie Pass, but you can't probably see any of those movies on Movie Pass.
You can get AMC stubs.
Yeah, you could. There's many other premium subscription plans that you can subscribe to see all these movies. That being said, that's why I say this weekend I can't wait to sit back and watch the numbers for, because I can't imagine all of these are going to break through. I don't think Robin Hood's going to do that well. We'll see. Even if I hadn't. I don't know. I'm not gonna. That's not what I think of the movie, because I can't say what I think of the movie. I just mean from a pure industry standpoint,
Sure.
I think Robin Hood is the odd man out.
I just want to do, sure.
Of all of these. But between Creed 2 and Ralph and The Grinch and Fantastic Beasts, I think it's going to be a good
I think it's a
battle.
great one. I know that I'm going to be heading out to the theater a bunch this weekend to catch up on some things, and we will watch it all unfold. We'll be back on Monday to talk about it.
I'm going to have to start pre-charting now.
You got to chart now,
Because
Dan.
we're going to have like 5-day holiday numbers on Monday, and so many percentages and drops and debuts and you name it. It's going to be a late Thanksgiving of numbers for you a week from today here on Screen Junkies News.
You're going to have to chart over those leftovers.
Yeah,
Turkey
I'm going to have
sandwich
to
chart.
fight that tryptophan nap to start looking at the box office returns. I'm not quite that crazy. Not quite that crazy. I'll wait till Thursday night.
All right. Well, this has been a good one. Let's find out I'm excited to see what happens this weekend. There's some really good movies in the mix there. We have some reviews up that you can watch and choose your own adventure at the theater this weekend.
Yes,
If
absolutely.
you had to pick one of the... Well, we haven't seen Creed yet,
I haven't seen Creed yet, yeah. So
All right.
we'll tell you
See you
tomorrow.
on Monday.